That Wayne, good work. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Okay, so the first part of our discussion today in regards to the Wairau blue-green network, and so this one is about setting the scene. And so welcome to Craig and Tom, all yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to introduce on my left Tom Mansell. Tom is Head of Sustainable Partnerships in Healthy Waters and Flood Resilience. And I think his attendance here is very appropriate when you consider that this project is all about future sustainability and all about partnering with the iwi and the community. So welcome, Tom, and thank you for your support. He's also done a grand job in fronting the media on this issue over recent times, and it's great to have a lot of media talent inside Healthy Waters, so I really appreciate that. Just a little bit of background. This is actually a big catchment, 1,450 hectares, a lot of waterways in the catchment, some 18 kilometres. And in actual fact, when you go back to let's go back 100 years, this area was actually a wetland area, natural wetland area. And in many ways, what we're looking to do now is actually go back to the future in a sense. That you could look at this project that we're talking about actually as a daylighting exercise, exposing what existed before urbanisation took hold and the reclamation that was the golf course became part of our current situation. It's highly urbanised, a lot of runoff occurring, and you've only got to look at the future predictions around climate change to know whatever problem we're trying to fix today, I can almost certainly assure you that that problem will be bigger tomorrow and bigger the time after. So what is really critical on this project is that we get our future planning correct and make sure that if we're going to put in a large storage area, that the area is big enough to cope. And so we'll be putting a lot of effort into determining that final sizing of the asset. I think that's really, really important. Look, we've already heard from the impacted communities this morning, so I won't dwell on the... They did a fantastic job of highlighting the challenges that everyone's faced in the area. Suffice it to say, we're at 142 Category 3 properties that have now been identified in the area. So it's our biggest single hotspot area in the region, and obviously subject to many, many insurance claims. I won't dwell on the next slide because that was more than adequately covered this morning. Just a little bit of pre-human history, which I think is actually quite interesting, in that before Lake Pupuki erupted, the water actually flowed south into Shoal Bay. But when Lake Pupuki did erupt, there was a massive rocky uplift, and that caused a layer of basalt rock which forms the natural barrier. So now the creek actually, through that event, changed direction and now flows through the basalt rock alongside Lake Pupuki to Milford Beach. It also means, particularly in that southern reach of the creek, if we need to do work in that creek, it's extraordinarily difficult because it's basalt, and so it involves a lot of difficulty in terms of trying to make that creek larger right at the bottom end of the creek. Sorry, I just flicked a bit too fast there. The motorway also is a physical barrier that prevents movement of water through the catchment, and as I previously talked through the issue, the urbanisation and impervious increase in stormwater runoff is only going to get bigger and bigger as time progresses. We've had a lot of discussions with you around blue-green networks, and that's just an example of what was achieved in the Green Slade Reserve of a during and after, and that's exactly the type of situation that we're trying to achieve with our proposed work in AF Thomas Park. So we've split the project up into 3 stages. Stage 1 being the detention in AF Thomas Park, and we require some 550,000 cubic metres of detention in the park. And it's easy to say the number, but I think we need to put a bit of context around what we actually mean by 550,000 cubic metres. It's equivalent to 44,000 truck and trailer movements. And so one of the things that I'm determined to do as the sponsor of this project is to ensure as little as that traffic goes onto our roading system as possible. In an ideal world, we would actually use all of that material to go onto the existing site, because that will have a really positive impact on both helping generate a higher ground level, which will then help achieve the type of storage volumes that we require, but also get those 44,000 truck and trailer movements off our roading network, which will do nothing to help the current situation we face with Auckland traffic. So really committed to as much reuse on the site as possible as a fundamental objective of this project. We've got a number of culvert and channel improvements that we need to do as part of stage 2. There's a bridge in Woodbridge Lane, which we are wanting to move, which is council land, so we can do that without any additional permissions. We've also got blue-green networks that we want to do in Totara Vale and Sunny Nook and Nile Road, and you've seen some very, very graphic imagery this morning around the devastation in Nile Road. And also some further detention improvements in the upper catchment. And then long term, we'd actually like to do some major replumbing through the commercial area, but that's not currently in our 10-year LTP, and that's something that we are going to be working to with a slightly longer time frame. But the important thing about the stages are, stage 2 doesn't work until stage 1 is commissioned and concluded. Stage 3 doesn't work until stages 1 and 2 are concluded, but when we design stage 1 and stage 2, they'll be designed with stage 3 in mind. In other words, this is a fully integrated outcome, but it has got 3 stages, and each stage is interdependent on the stage before. So at a very high level, because we will be going into a lot more of the specific details in the confidential part of the paper, but this does reduce the flood risk exposure for 261 properties in this area, reduces flows by 30%. There are also some significant water care and Transpower assets in the area, which suffered damage in the January 23 flooding event. And the other point I'd like to make also is that there is actually a large water care wastewater pipe that actually bisects the golf course. It goes right through the middle of the golf course. That's a 1,200 millimetre diameter wastewater pipe. So any options we're doing around storage, we need to recognise that that pipe's there to stay. And so at the very least, we're going to need 2 cells, one on each side of the pipe, to achieve that volume, because there's no way that we can practically relocate that pipe. So that becomes a significant constraint to how we design the infrastructure that would be required to achieve that type of storage volume. Obviously, maintaining access to the North Shore Hospital, absolutely critical. We've also got a number of retirement villages in the area. And you've heard this morning also talking about what can occur with blockage risk. And so very, very hard to occur what form the blockage is going to take in the stormwater network. And so the way that we do our inletting and our outletting is really critical in terms of how we manage that blockage risk. And of course, if we're going to do a project of this scale to address flooding risk, we don't ignore water quality, we don't ignore amenity value, we don't ignore biodiversity, because these are all consequential outcomes that can be delivered through a well-designed project. And we certainly shouldn't ignore that the economic uplift that this will create for the region if we get it right. And the other opportunity, of course, is that with the Category 3 land that has been acquired by council through this process, once the infrastructure has gone into place, there will be some opportunities with redevelopment in certain aspects of that land that we're creating. So, high-level summary, very significant social, economic, environmental and cultural benefits for this program. Now, if we don't proceed, well, the good news is right now that Wairau Stage 1 has now approved Crown funding. So it was recently signed off by the Minister of Finance and Minister of Emergency Management, and that is 62% of the cost of Stage 1 of $36 million is actually funded through the Crown funding aspect, so Council's funding share is 38% of the project cost for Stage 1. Obviously, no project, no flood risk reduction, and so that potential loss of life risk remains very significant. We've got increased risk of asset failure and increased severe weather events. We've heard a lot this morning already about the trauma that existed and still exists in those communities. There's no redevelopment potential on Category 3 properties because we need the infrastructure to make these Category 3 property rationalisations work. And we're not delivering on what we committed to in the community through the 2024 LTP, where the whole Making Space for Water was such an important plank of the Healthy Waters and Flood Resilience work program for that 10-year period. Tom's been very heavily involved, as I said in the beginning, through the partnership component of this project. So I'll get Tom to talk through the next couple of slides around the work that he's done in supporting this program of work. Kia ora, over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Greg. The project team is very well aware of the speed we need to move at this. We've heard the communities are still at risk, so we're very keen to get this away and start designing and building as soon as we can. But we are aware also it's quite impactful for the community, and we see these blue-green projects, especially this one in this catchment, as quite transformational. So we want to take key partners, mana whenua and community with us as much as we can within the timeframes we've got. The public engagement and consultation, although we've met with the residents already, we've met with the golf course, and we've had a number of those meetings, it hasn't really begun yet. We really want to kick this off once the business case is signed and we work through the design, looking at what the community, what the key stakeholders really need. We've already established a mana whenua working group, and that has been going for a few months already, been working with community facilities and a number of key stakeholders. So the stakeholder group and partners we've identified, obviously local board, the mana whenua group, we already have up and running, highly impacted residents. We want to get a design team that involves representation from as many parts of the community as we can, being at the same time to push this through in a timely manner from the residents are still at risk, and also the government timeframe is quite strict and that will follow. The initial views from the initial consultation we've had so far, everyone agrees this work needs to happen. We have a duty to keep our residents safe, and we have to utilise the assets we've got to try and mitigate this flooding. We have been to there are affected users, and we do recognise the golf course as significantly affected. We have been early consultation with them. Obviously, there's going to be further consultation. We're going to look through the plans and work with them as much as we can. And because of that, obviously, there has been quite significant media attention, understandably, but we'll work through that.
Thanks for that, Tom. So this is just a little bit of, I guess, a roadmap of where we've been and where we're wanting to head to. So kicked off in June 2024 with the long-term plan approval. Then we had the tranche 2 prioritisation paper that was identifying Clover Drive and Wairau as our 2 top priorities. Went through the TRIC committee on the 13th of February. The Crown funding approval came through on the 26th of March for stage 1, which is the co-funding project with the Crown. We're obviously at today's meeting in the red box today. And then we will, once we've got the sign off today, the next step would be to formalise our community working group. We want to get on as soon as we can with removing the Woodbridge Lane Bridge, as well as all the work we'll need to do around the design, the detailed design, the cost assessments and the revised cost-benefit analysis. So when we come back to you next time, we'll be able to show you all of the alternative options that we've evaluated within the AF Thomas Park area in particular, and also we'll have a better handle on the type of work that will be required to be done to enable us to move further on the stage 2 works for Wairau, which will be a key feature of the next LTP. And although we say beginning construction in late 2027, I personally think we can do better than that, and particularly if we can get some traction around support around making the consenting process easier for ourselves. Really keen to get on and start earthworks in the golf course area, particularly as soon as possible. And I think at that stage, that's us. Very happy to answer any questions. Kia ora.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Thanks, Tom. I'm hoping that we can contain questions until we're into the confidential bit, because then we can ask a lot. But I'm going to move this, Richard, in a second, and you'll note. So there, we did circulate it. So in regards to the red chairs rec, which is basically requesting that that we undertake a technical assessment of the golf course's proposal this morning, and ensure that it's included within that business case work. So that's where that's at. So are we wanting to ask questions now, or can we wait until we're in confidential, Chris?
Yeah, I take your point. I think that most of the conversation will be in the next section, but this motion before us, can we just discuss that motion? Or not so much discuss it, I just want to ask you as chair. Firstly, the word request, I don't think it's superfluous. Where actually it's that Healthy Waters undertake the work. But can I just check with the team, Craig and the team? I'm sure, Chair, that you've socialised this with the staff. I just want to understand what this means for the team undertaking a technical assessment when, you know, the business case is there for stage 1. Can you just outline what a technical assessment of an external's proposal means in the context of where we're up to, and how it might modify the direction going forward, if it has merit?
So with the proposal, to put it in very plain terms, the proposal that we've come up with that's been costed and developed to get to the stage we are now are 2 cells, one each side of the water care pipeline. If we're to look at a proposal like the golf course, I haven't counted up the number of cells that they've got on that, because this is quite new information to us, but you'd have to think, just looking at it, it looked to me like there might be 30 different cells, if you like, that are interconnected, that make up the ability to create a total storage volume of 550,000 cubic metres. So we would look at the implications around both the cost of the program and the deliverability of it, because it was expressed by the golf course that they thought this project could be done with 9 holes of the golf course remaining operational at all times. Whereas up until now, our assessment indicates that because of the numbers that we're talking about, we had always worked on the assumption that in order to actually come up with a cost-effective earthworks program, and you look at the size and scale of the issue that we're dealing with, that all of the land would be required, and then you'd be able to look at future use opportunities once the actual decision or the infrastructure been put in with the actual storage, or the design had been completed for the storage. But we're happy to look at if this is, as mentioned by the golf course, a cheaper and an effective option. We'll seriously look at it.
So can I just come in there, Craig? So who would be undertaking that work? I mean, I'm assuming there's been a number of parties, technical expertise from outside of Healthy Waters and flood resistance have been involved with this. Can you just run through, because there's probably some questions being asked about, maybe reputations or capability of those parties that we've been with, the parties we've engaged, whether they be stormwater engineers, freshwater people, ecologists, landscape architects. Can you just tell us who are the parties that have helped us get to where we are?
So what we've, at this concept level, we've used the hydraulic modelers and through the consultancy WSP, and we've used, that has been looked over with our in-house modelers as well, and the engineering side as well. So it's basically the hydraulic modelers and the engineers at this concept stage. So to review what the golf course has proposed, yes, it will take some time, but not huge amounts. We'll run the basics first, the hydraulic model, and we'll see how viable it is from there, and that work needs to be done first.
Okay, so there's some question that we're not reviewing it. It would go to a consultant that we're working with who's familiar with the work to date, and they would assess it and say, well, maybe we have looked at that or haven't looked at that, and it would be an external entity contracted by us, commissioned by us, that is familiar with the work.
Correct.
Okay, and I would deem that independent, that their very best professional judgment would be asked to be brought to paper. Correct?
Correct. It's
We've only got one goal on this project, that is to come back with a proposal that effectively is the best cost benefit in accordance with the 10 principles set down by council around effective procurement, to make sure that every dollar of ratepayers' money we're spending is spent wisely. So that's our only mission, is to make sure that we're putting forward a proposal that meets your requirements and is best for community in order to meet those requirements. And so as part of that process, very happy to look at an alternative option and just see how it stacks up. But I think the thing what we've created now is what I'd consider to be a baseline proposal which we can measure other projects against in terms of are they better or worse, in terms of the financial cost versus the benefit. Kia ora.
And one last one, if I may, Chair, I'm a little bit cheeky. In the workshops, I viewed this as an incredible opportunity to show an exemplar project. Craig, and I think that's what I heard that your team wants to achieve here, because this is a lot more than water detention and flood resilience. This is an opportunity for a freshwater environment, a place for birds in the city and invertebrate life, etc., and a place that could go to, landscape architecture competition to work up at some stage. Is that still the view of your unit?
Well, absolutely, because we talked previously before about the Awakiri wetland came up in the conversation this morning as an example in a brownfield situation of what was considered to be a great outcome. That's the type of standard to which we'd expect this project to be delivered as well, which I think meets the community needs, achieves great environmental and ecological outcomes, as well as solving a significant flooding risk in that area as well. We don't get the opportunity to work in these areas very often, so when we do it, we need to do it once and do it properly. Kia ora.
Okay, before we move on, someone like to move an extension of time, as we move. Thanks. Second Shane, those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
No.
Carried. Okay, so all of these questions coming up, they obviously can't be asked in confidential, so we will keep going. Wayne?
Sure. So I've got a few questions, Mr. Chair. The background is this is pretty much the first time I've seen all of this detail. That's within the last 3 days or so, which is not much time to consider it. And I'm assuming that most councillors haven't had a site visit to the location. Maybe they've even never been to the golf course. I don't know. I certainly have. So the first question I've got just goes to D, and I have raised this with you, Mr. Chair, and that is that, yes, there's the aspect of the Takapuna golf proposal, but there may be other aspects of proposals that should be considered in a business case. And I intend to raise some things. So my real concern is that we don't adopt the approach of closing things down, which I would suggest has been the approach to date, and because of the work done by Takapuna Golf at their expense, we now have something that may well have huge merit, but there may be other things. So I would look for a change to that addition, as I said, and as you assured me, Mr. Chair.
So just to be clear, Wayne, you popped into my office last night or yesterday and hadn't read the thing that had been sent out, but the amendment, and then this morning, and I asked you to flick something out as soon as you could, and so this morning I got something from staff just saying that you wanted to open it up to all proposals that we may or may not have seen, and so my advice back was, I don't agree with that, so I'm not going to add it to my chair's recommendation, and that you had every opportunity to take up an amendment by addition, should you wish to, and that was what the advice went back, and then you subsequently came to me and said you were fine. So
No. Through you, Mr. Chair, let's be quite clear. I engaged with officers. The officers are here today. I asked and spoke to them around those changes, and my understanding that they have engaged. I have to rely on that, and I stand by my concern that yes, there is a proposal of Takapuna Golf, but there are other considerations. I will give you an example. So, by way of question, I'll give you this example by way of question. Is it correct that directly adjacent to the golf course and between the golf course and the drain is the Event Finder Centre, and that the pathway of floodwaters has to go through what is currently the car parking area of the Event Finder Centre? And did not the Event Finder Centre suffer extreme damage in the floods to the extent that there was a great deal of work required, perhaps similar to the properties affected in residential areas? Can you confirm that? I don't need much more than a yes.
Yeah, we're well aware of what happened at the event centre, yes.
Okay, so for example, one of the things that I would suggest we should be considering as part of this work is what happens in respect of the event centre itself and the land attached to it, which could well be part of a more refined proposal. I know the event centre, because I have spoken with them, are concerned about their long-term future and the prospect of actually shifting. Because if there is a significant flood, and that flood could occur sooner rather than later, they're going to be wiped out again. So why wouldn't you consider something like that as part of a proposal? So that is a singular example, Mr. Chair, of the reason not to be myopic and close things off, which is of real concern to me, and I would suggest will be of concern to people in the community. And if you don't take into account the provision of the Local Government Act around reasonably practicable options and so on, you actually potentially cause delays. So I'll let you think about what I'm suggesting as far as D. You might want to consult with some officers. You might want to consult with the officers that are here, like Rebecca, for example, that I discussed this with. So I'll just move on to some questions. In respect of the golf course proposal, if we accept that the golf course as it stands, or a variation thereof, would continue, and the golf course is able to continue to maintain the area in the same way they have for, I don't know how many years, approaching 100 years or the like, there's been a golf course there for a long time, what is the net present value of that operational saving to us, and bearing in mind that over and above that, the golf course pays us rates, as compared to the net present value of maintaining detention ponds, which are stocked with a range of vegetation that we know, because we've got information about this, cost a lot of money. Have we done any net present value analysis around those sorts of options?
So all of that information would come back as part of the business case development process.
Okay. The other question I've got, Mr. Chair, that goes to cost-benefit analysis is that usually through you, Mr. Chair, cost-benefit analysis goes to a number of factors. In this case, yes, stormwater, but equally the parks aspects, particularly as it goes to active recreation, putting a value on that, the related health aspects that the golf course has pointed out, because there are many tens of thousands of people that use the golf course across a range of ethnicities, genders, and so on, and ages. So would not that involve people in finance across our council, parks, conceivably consulting with people in the health area, maybe Otago University and the like, and others, so that we've got a little bit more comprehensive benefit cost than what we might otherwise have.
So I believe it's in the, that's covered in the confidential and bulkier report, Wayne.
Okay, the other question I've got, have you looked at other golf courses elsewhere, locations like Singapore and so on, where the sorts of suggestions that the Takapuna golf course has made?
Yeah, I'm personally, for one of my sins, I'm a massive golf fan, so I probably would consider myself to be a bit of an expert when it comes to golf courses. So I can assure you that I'm extremely familiar with many golf courses around the world that are designed to provide flood mitigation as part of their design.
And the other question I've got, given that you mentioned there are 44,000 truck and trailer movements, I mean, I'm not sure where those truck and trailer are going to be going, but if you've got a proposal, and let's say the Takapuna golf course proposal involves less truck and trailer movements, particularly off-site, is that not quite a substantial consideration to factor in?
Look, I think at the end of the day, if you're creating storage of X cubic metres, regardless of whether it's one hole, 5 holes or 50 holes, you're still going to have the same amount of material to shift to create the volume that you need to for the stormwater purpose. So I think all proposals are going to create massive needs for an extremely large earth-moving project.
And
Sure.
The last question I've got, Mr. Chair, just goes to the general context. If we accept that across Auckland we have a massive number of active recreation areas that are located on old swamps, I could rattle off a number, are located in lower-lying areas that may have been reclaimed, and there are other golf courses, rugby fields, and the like. Should we not be really giving serious consideration to multi-use, because otherwise we stand to lose across Auckland a very great deal of active recreational space against a background where we've got potentially sea level rise and coastal inundation coming at us from the other end. And what does that look like? I really don't think the officers have considered that, but it is the larger picture. Otherwise, I would suggest we're setting in train something that is going to considerably change the landscape of Auckland and considerably impact on the recreational opportunities that all the people that live in Auckland enjoy.
Thank you. Honey?
Just a quick note, and I did see that you had engaged with mana whenua, and how would that continue?
We've got a working group with mana whenua right throughout the design process, right through to the construction. As partners, we are and will continue working closely with them.
Just one follow-up one. In terms of working with that last resolution up there, have they been made aware of that? And if technical assessment, would that state that there's been a cultural value or assessment done, or cultural impact assessment done?
We've been with the mana whenua working group from the very beginning. We've been working with them, so if they require a cultural impact assessment, we will, but so far we haven't. They are going to be very much part of the design process. They are aware of the proposal from Takapuna Golf. We need to socialise this with them again.
Thank you.
Okay, Alf?
Tēnā koutou, thank you, Chair. With D as it is, that won't hold up the timeline that you show. I just want to make sure it won't hold up and the work's going to get done. Am I correct in that, Craig?
Absolutely. One commitment I will make for this project is that we're absolutely committed to dealing with this project as urgently as we can. It's already well over 2 years since we had the flooding event. Every day the risk of another flooding event is a day closer. And as the community said today, now is the time to act. And really today is the first step towards that final course of action around doing, because we've now got the Crown sign-off. If we get the council sign-off today on the initiate business case, that gives us the green light to proceed into more detailed design and coming back to you with a more advanced business case as we firm up on the thinking process.
Question to you, Chair. That's understanding orders 1.5.6. It's just to confirm that there is no amendment that we will be discussing at the moment, just as per those recommendations, because you've included that as part of your recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. Can I confirm that?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes, but I think, can we not have if Wayne wanted to put an amendment up, could he not?
Yeah, I'm unsure whether he can now that he's spoken.
They were questions, Mr. Chair. We have not moved into debate.
Let me finish. I just wanted to make sure that that is where we are at the moment. So then, just wanted to find out. So I'll leave it to you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, John.
I see that Green Slade Reserve has been used a bit in the visuals here. In fact, you could have just about equally used Freyberg Park, which has a sports field very similar. I just want to check that when it's not acting as a retention receptacle or cell or whatever you want to call it, it's used for rugby and rugby league, isn't it?
So the way the project's been conceived at the moment is that some of the storage area would be dry when it hasn't rained for a long period of time, but some of the storage area would be a permanent wetland as well, because that's the way that effectively the excavation that we do will take it back to where that natural existing wetland is, because that's the way that nature set this thing up in the first place. And one thing I've learnt in my role at Healthy Waters is it's far better to work with nature than try to fight nature.
Yeah.
So I think the more we can replicate what was there in the first place, the more chance it'll be of being a sustainable outcome long term. And so it'd be a mixture of both a wetland and a dry field situation that would only become storage in a big event.
Yeah, I just say in terms of ratio, it's got a full-size rugby pitch there, and it's got some of that other natural drainage around it. By far, the majority is the actual sports field. That's correct, isn't it? Yep. Okay, so, and the reason I asked that, because that's obviously a confined area, but just as a general principle, we're going into a bigger area, a golf course, but technically speaking, do the same principles apply in terms of storage and conceivably either as a big unit or smaller units, you could apply the same green slate approach then to the Pawanama golf course if you chose to.
Yeah. So the whole thing we're developing has a recreation purpose in a sense, some of it being passive recreation and potentially some of it becoming active recreation. And that's a decision that at the appropriate time can be made by council as to what it sees that long-term use of that land being. Kia ora.
The final cost, a question, Mr. Chair, goes to the cost for stage one. I think is in the vicinity of 58 million for that. So that's the kind of baseline we're anticipating to do the works on the golf course itself.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, John. Richard?
Thank you. And just to clarify, you have worked with Event Finder and the C and the board are in favour of us going forward with this business case. The questions I have are just on proposals, and the proposals you've come up with did not start here. There is an assumption that this was sort of plucked and then you just proposed it to the boards, but as the board said, they actually asked you to look at this, not the other way around. Could you just give a brief of how you got to this point?
So it's quite a long journey already we've been on. So initially from direction from the boards, we looked at what we needed to do, which was store that amount of water, and we looked at A.F. Thomas. So we went through very high level a number of scenarios, and we then went forward with the most probable one that was the most likely cost-effective one, which is the one we've come up with. So initially we did run through a number of scenarios that how we would store that huge volume of water. So it has been a process that we've come to here today, over a year in work.
And just to clarify that I know the local MPs are in favour of the stage one and stage two as well as the local boards, but do you just want to confirm what Crown have approved? They've approved us, my understanding is that they've approved us to do what you presented to them.
So the good news about the Crown deal is that the Crown are funding stage one, but if there are any monies left over from stage one, they will go into stage two and still be subject to Crown funding. And that also applies to the category 3 as well. So for any reason we end up with a surplus out of the category 3 buyout, or the surplus out of the Mangere project, or a surplus out of Clover Drive, or a surplus out of Wairau stage 1, all of those monies would go into the Crown support for Wairau stage 2. That's from a Crown perspective. Kia ora.
And just to confirm, they have agreed to the proposal based on what we've given them, which is the proposal you've seen today. So that's what they've agreed the business case on.
Cool. And I'm sorry, Duncan, do you have the access to the two images I sent? Just want to, and I know it is difficult, and I think it's important to do this in public, but there's two images I just want to show. One is, sorry. That is the motorway and the busway, and that was early on in the night, so it had only really started raining at that point. So that is just below the golf course, and I know there was a proposal from the golf course to potentially send water that way, but can you comment at all on why this is difficult? This is towards Akaranga, towards Shoal Bay, just below the golf course.
So we did look at that option. There's a number of consenting issues also to tunnelling, going through hard basalt, going through sensitive high ecological areas, and again, getting water into quite a significant pipe. There were issues with blockages and residual risk, so we eliminated that option fairly early on.
Thank you. And the next image, please, Duncan or Lotta. Cool. So this is on the other side of, so the upper end of the golf course towards Wairoa. Could you just maybe explain essentially what you're, and that's Transpower and Watercare there, essentially what you're trying to do is get this to be happening in the golf course first. Because this was, I think, about 5 or 6 o'clock, and the really bad flooding happened about between 7 and 9, I think.
So the whole way the scheme is designed to operate is that we hold the water back in the golf course and release it back into the downstream network as capacity in that network becomes available to avoid overtopping that network. And that's effectively how we've arrived at the sizing decision, so how much water we've got to actually hold back while there's insufficient downstream capacity, and then we release it effectively through a control mechanism as capacity becomes available.
Thank you. And the reason, like, obviously none of us want to get rid of golf or any recreation, but the reason you've gone to this, I understand, is due to, well, the proximity of it, but also is it the case that we have to look here before any private or Public Works Act purchases?
We do, but even but this is still, irrespective of that, this is the best option anyway. The fact that it's already in council ownership is a massive bonus. I mean, there could have been a scenario where that whole area was full of houses, for example. But when you look at the whole layout, and I keep coming back to the point, when nature designed this catchment, this is where the low spot of this catchment was. This is where the wetland actually existed. So we are very much going back to a daylighting exercise and creating what was there in pre-development times, and making that the basis of the whole solution for the catchment.
And just, sorry, Chair, we've had a lot of concern from the businesses, and I know the Crown Agreement is to reduce risk to homes, but is it, and I just want to publicly, give confidence to the businesses who are upset, this will, and we hope it will, have offshoot effects to reduce, like, is the intent, even though the aim has to be residential, that it will have potential safety and reduce risk to downstream businesses?
It has limited benefit to the commercial area. It will reduce the risk to some extent, but the substantial risk to the commercial area won't be reduced until we do stage 3, which effectively is removing that current concrete channel and providing a new waterway through that commercial area.
And a bunch of the questions from golfers and other in the community say, why don't you just focus on the Nile Road, the catchment where you're buying houses? Can you explain just briefly why it has to be in this order?
Well, until we have the ability to control downstream flows, there's nothing to be gained by creating a blue-green environment in the downstream area, because that will just be drowned by the fact that that water can't be held back. Therefore, it won't operate as it's designed to operate.
Thanks.
All good. Greg?
Thanks, Chair. Just a question I asked of the local board, a bit of clarification around the funding. So that money that the Crown's providing for the project, I just want to understand if the golf course proposal or any alternative proposal seem to be viable, is that funding still fully available?
If it turns out that proposal meets the same, has the same cost benefit and can be achieved for that same sum of money and achieves all the outcomes that we're looking to achieve, I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be acceptable to the Crown.
Okay, no other questions. I have a question for you, and just in regards to this morning, the consultants, civil plan, who they're a reputable consulting company who have obviously said they'd been doing a month's work in regards to this. So any other proposition or proposal that's put up, what is that going to mean in terms of the timeline and the desire, I suppose, from every single group that, including the representatives from the golf course this morning, what would it do to the timeline that they all said needs to happen as quickly as possible without delay? What would any additional unsolicited, unprepared proposals mean to that timeline and us being able to deliver what the community are screaming out for?
Hard to be too specific, but I could say that it's not going to be good for the timeline because we've got limited resources that are focusing on solving this problem. So every new proposal that came out of the woodwork takes time and effort to look at it. That means that's taking a resource from somewhere. But also it's going to add to the cost as well, depending on how many alternatives we were considering. A lot of effort's gone into getting us to where we are already. I can assure you that WSP have considered many, many sub-options, if you like, to get to this as the preferred option already. And so I think by sitting down with the consultants, I'm hopeful that we would get to a common ground quite quickly on establishing whether that alternative is viable or not.
Okay. No further questions. Wayne, have you got an amendment?
Correct, you haven't, Mr Chair. It's been emailed.
I don't, because I don't have my computer. I never have my computer up here, mate,
Okay,
so
well,
the staff have.
It's been emailed to Barry, it's been emailed to the Secretary.
So it's up on screen. It's up on screen now.
Sure. The only modification I would suggest is I'm mindful that what we don't want is to deal with proposals that might be flippant. So perhaps the insertion of the word serious, or there may be some other word that you or the officers suggest, Mr Chair. So what we are considering is both the proposal from the court, and for example, if there was a proposal from Event Finder Stadium, for example, who are adjacent and affected, and that was a serious proposal, that could be worthy of consideration. So I'd just invite any suggestion as to an improvement on the wording. So as much as I'm putting that up and it's being considered, it's not, there's room to move.
So it's your amendment, mate. So if you want to, it's up to you to, and I certainly wouldn't be helping you because I don't agree with it. But
well, thanks for your predetermination, Mr Chair, but that's okay. So perhaps the word just serious proposals.
is that what you're proposing? It's
Yes.
your amendment, Wayne. So
Yes, that's what I'm proposing, but I'm also just inviting the officers to comment, Mr Chair, because I understand what they're saying. But I'm also mindful that if we are embracing proposals, and those proposals might have merit, it might even save time and save cost.
So are there questions on the amendment?
Yes.
Alf?
I haven't got a question. I'm going to speak to the amendment.
Now we're getting confusing. Okay, so staff have moved away. The questions are any questions to the mover? Are we seeing them? No? Okay, so comments. You got anything, Wayne? You want to kick it off?
Sure, if I can speak to the amendment. So I've had the opportunity to look at the Takapuna Golf Course proposal fairly carefully. I've had the merits of it explained to me in terms of the hydraulic modelling, and I believe that it has merit, and I don't pretend to be a stormwater expert. And I've had the opportunity to consider the massive saving that council has, that it will afford over some decades from the phenomenal operational savings that we have. I mean, they are immense. And I've also seen the golf course in action and the huge number of people that play golf there. So that is really brought to my attention that there are proposals out there in the community that should be seriously considered. I've also spoken previously with Event Finder Stadium, for example, and I would believe that they would have a serious proposal because their site is considerably affected. The floodwater effectively goes through their car park to get to the golf course. So if there was an opportunity to consider something there, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? And I know that one of the options, for example, might be relocating their operation to North Harbour Stadium, for example, where there is space for that sort of thing. So I think there's merit in considering other serious proposals, and I'm mindful that we're sitting here, and as much and all as the officers may have worked on this, many people in the community haven't seen it. We haven't seen it. We haven't had any workshops, and we've had very little time. And I don't like circumstances which I see too often around this table, where we have a lack of contestable advice and we're effectively narrowed around a limited pathway against a background where there are immense sums of money involved. And that is the case here. So I seek support for, frankly, an amendment that I think is pretty reasonable. But as I said earlier, if somebody wants to add a further amendment to enhance the wording, I'm more than open to that. Thank you.
Thank you. John, have you got anything as seconder? Okay. Alf.
I have an issue with the amendment, and the issue is any other serious proposals not previously considered. What I think we're doing is opening it up for any and everything to come in. My issue is, for me, the Takapuna golf's proposal, I think has merit. And that's why I'm saying, let's investigate. They had the opportunity. They grabbed the opportunity. They came here. They put the proposal in front of us. What I'm worried about is that we're now going to invite others. I know that there is a wording in there, any other serious proposals, but I personally don't want what we're talking about here to be delayed. I asked the question earlier of Craig and the team and said, will this, the one that's been added by the chair and the mover, will it delay work on the blue-green project? And the answer was no. We're going to open up ourselves to possibly delay some of that work. Why? Because we then have to wait for others to come in. Are they serious or not proposals? This is why for us, I want to go back and I want Craig and his team to look at Takapuna, the golf's proposal, because I think it's got merit. But we won't find out until they look at it. So from my perspective, definitely not supporting the amendment. And then I'll speak, excuse me, if it gets defeated, I'll speak to then what will be the substantive. Kia ora.
Okay, thank you. Angela?
Well, thanks, Andy. I know it's getting late in the day. Essentially, supporting what Alf said, I cannot support this amendment, having listened to this morning and now to Craig and team around how far this process has come in conjunction with the local boards, mana whenua and community, to even think that we would consider delaying anything, and it will be delayed. And I think this is just so unnecessary. It is really frustrating. I appreciate that it's everyone's entitlement to put up an amendment. I appreciate that. But boy, what we heard this morning, and particularly with weather today and tomorrow, I don't know why we would even consider putting something up that could possibly delay this. So I'm comfortable with the Chair's recs, Andy, and thank you for putting that up, because it means that Takapuna Golf's proposal will actually have a look at, get a technical assessment, and that's probably going to be delay enough. So I won't be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Richard?
Thank you. I'm disappointed about this. This is not the first time, Councillor Walker, that it's come to us, and this is the fourth project that has come to us in the exact same process that we've had before. Mangere, Clover Drive, others. This is the process they've come to us. We've had workshops, we've discussed Waido, we've discussed the different options. We actually prioritise Waido and Clover Drive, and so if you've just realised that happened, that's pretty strange. Next thing, Event Finder. Spoken to Brian Blake, the CE, spoken to board members on Event Finder. They support the Stage 1 and Stage 2 proposal going forward to business case. They had $7 million worth of damage to their building and 480,000 people affected through the floods. They want us to progress. They think we've been too slow already. So don't come here and say, oh, Event Finder might have a proposal. They don't. Brian and team have been very clear about that. The other thing is, just throwing up there any proposals, just any proposals. There's no timeline on that. There's no limitation. There's no who could put up proposals. Of course, we want to look at the golf course's proposal. It's a beautiful course. It's a popular course. We do not want to get rid of it. The issue is we all have sat here through the LTP 2 years of discussion saying Healthy Waters must prioritise the worst and most dangerous areas, and sadly, the Waido was one of the worst and most dangerous areas. You weren't there when we were on the streets in the weeks after the floods. We picked up 2,500 tonnes of people's household items off the streets in Milford. I had people of all ages. I were in houses where the water was up 2 metres. The water had taken out, I think, about 1,000 cars in this catchment that were completely totaled. There were 69 people saved by Surf Lifesaving in this catchment. There are schools, hospitals. If this happened at 3 p.m. with all the kids coming out, then we might have a very different story on the deaths. If this happened in the middle of the night, midnight, 1 a.m., we might have had a very different story. We had older people piggybacking other older people out of the Lady Elm, out of the Sunninook one, took the mayor down to some Sunninook homes which were totaled, as in people had to climb on their roofs in urban areas. We had buses floating, we had buses full. So any delay, the people who sat here, there were other people who wanted to speak who were actually, they knew they would be too emotional to sit here and speak today. If we just delay on some random proposals that we don't even know about, just to make a political point about someone else's community, Councillor Walker, you've never even come to me or spoke to me about this, which I'm really disappointed. I would never do that in your community or to you. So I think this change is an affront to our community. The team will definitely look at the golf option. There have been other options that the Healthy Waters have met with the golf club on already, and they were discounted, and I hope magically we can work in this option. But also remember, the local boards requested this be investigated before Healthy Waters had the proposal, and the local boards are the final decision makers on what happens post the lease. It may be golf. It may be, if this project doesn't happen here, it could be the 18 holes. It may be 9 holes. It may be whatever, but that is not up to us. And that's been through the court before. That's not our delegation to decide what goes here. So I hope we can support in the confidential the items going forward, and we hope we can react to the community. But if you were there, and I didn't see you, helping rip out carpets and belongings with the Defence Force.
Mr. Chair, is this line of attack going to continue?
There's no attack.
You're the chair.
Point of order, the speaker is speaking.
So I'm just saying...
Point of order?
I've stood in front of hundreds of people, extremely upset, swearing, crying, We've had hundreds of people having to move out of these areas. If we delay with no set time and this passed, we will lose the Crown funding. Our local MPs are in favour of us moving forward on this, so are the local boards. We just have to move forward and investigate. And I'm just disappointed that this has come up, and it doesn't really say what would happen if this passed today, on who and what proposals and when they would even come back to us and who would fund them to be looked at. So yes, I'm exercised about this, but I hope it doesn't get support. Thank you.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say I'm disappointed at the tone the meeting has taken over this issue, because I heard Mr. McElroy express his views that he was open to the Takapuna golf course approach, and he was going to be pragmatic about it, and I take his word for that. I think there's no need for Councillor Walker to be chastised. Councillor Walker has always been a champion for the region's sporting facilities, and indeed a champion for surf lifesaving, given that Councillor Hills has mentioned the role of surf lifesaving, the good people in surf lifesaving during the floods in Takapuna. We had floods all over the region. The same thing happened right across the region, Grey Lynn in particular. So there's no need for war stories as a sort of for morally chastised Councillor Walker. Councillor Walker, I think he's trying to be inclusive and not prescriptive in his amendment, but I think he is actually backed up by the law in this matter. Section 77 of the Local Government Act decision making, 77.1, requirements in relation to decisions. A local authority must, in the course of the decision-making process, A, seek to identify all reasonably practicable options for the achievement of the objective of a decision. And it goes on. So when he talks about seriously, I think if he wanted to be precise, he could put that in, and he had the full backing of the law. I don't think a whole lot of people are going to come out of the woodwork with alternative schemes. There are only two schemes, one by the council, which will seriously damage an extremely important regional facility, and the one by the Takapuna golf course itself, which I am convinced will do the job, and I'm confident that Mr. McElroy and the Healthy Waters team are open-minded about that. So please let's move together in consensus over this matter. It's not a matter of unless we do this immediately, it's the end of the world. 2 years have gone by. We need to make the right decision. There need not be a delay, but most importantly, there's no need for one of our members to be chastised for coming up supporting a more inclusive approach. And that's what I have to say. So I will be supporting his amendment on principle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. John?
Yeah, well, it's been a lot longer than 2 years. I can remember getting off the bus at the bottom of the road there, where all the Westlake boys were dropped off if they came from Birkdale, and that so-called Wairau stream was a raging torrent. In fact, one of the studies done at UE level was on the Wairau catchment, so quite a proportion of the students that went to Westlake were intimately aware of the issues in the catchment, and Milford used to flood badly back there too. So I agree with Councillor Lee. The hyperbolic posturing I don't think is really appropriate here. This is an important issue. Of course, you don't want to delay it. One of the reasons Councillor Walker wasn't down in the Wairau Valley, he was busy enough up in Stanmore Bay and Browns Bay, where there was some pretty bad flooding scenes too. Maybe not quite as bad, but Nothing too cheery about big chunks of the Albany ward as well, just like all the other parts of Auckland. So it's not a flood competition here, it shouldn't be. What we want is the best outcome here. And as everyone said, including the golf people, who made it very clear on a number of occasions, a solution here is non-negotiable. So take that as a given. Doing it in a timely manner is also not negotiable. That goes without saying as well. So to suggest that perhaps just looking for anything else that might come out of the woodwork in terms of things that may help us, well, why wouldn't you do that? It's not going to slow the process down. It's not. I don't think there'll be anything other than what the Takapuna Golf Course come up, because they're the only ones with the resource to employ engineers and consultancies to come up with the sort of technical expertise that might make an impact on that. But if there was something else that's helpful, I mean, mention the North Harbour Event Stadium there, that's on a significant parcel of land. They have been really concerned in the past that they will have to move, or they may have to move because of what happened to them. A little bit like the badminton club along by the Westlake Boys bottom fields, just along the road, where people had to be lifted out of the flood torrent there as well. So any other serious proposals not previously considered? Well, if something comes out, I think our officers quite rightly, said they're looking to make the best decision and approach it with an open mind. Well, if you approach it with an open mind, then if something that is relevant comes through, well, of course you're going to consider it. So I'm glad this area is going to get some serious response to, because it's needed. There are other parts of Auckland that also need it who aren't getting something. So that's the way the cookie crumbles, I suppose, for the moment. In terms of our obligations here, we do have the Local Government Act. It does refer to considering all practicable options. I don't think there'll be anything too much else that comes other than what Te Akapuna Golf has put on the table, because I think what we've established here is the same principle applies for the retention as it has in some of the other facilities, only on a much bigger scale. I guess my final comment, Mr. Chair, is that this just isn't, an ordinary golf course that serves the people around Onawa Road. It is one of regional significance. It's the busiest one in New Zealand. I would say it's one of the few golf courses that has every Tom, Dick and Harry playing it, no matter what nationality, ethnicity or wage bracket, you get all sorts of people playing on this golf course. So, of course, if we can come up with something that does both, why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you do it? So that's all I've got to say, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Daniel?
I wasn't going to speak, but this will be the only comment that I'm going to make in relation to this. And I won't be supporting the amendment, Wayne. The reason for that is that Brian Blake, who is a very good friend of mine, and he's the chair of a licensing trust and I'm a deputy chair of it, has been contacting me. And the advice that I got from him was that whilst Event Finder Stadium Board doesn't have an official position on this, they are broadly supportive of where Healthy Waters is going. And so that's enough for me to persuade me in relation to how Event Finder Stadium works in relation to this. But I won't, once we deal with the amendment, then the substantive. But I just want to say, Chair, I want to thank Healthy Waters, and I want to thank in particular the residents who came and spoke, as well as Takapuna Golf. And I also want to commend the advocacy from John Gillen and the new chair of the Devonport, Melissa Powell, which I thought was very persuasive, actually. And ultimately, look, I get that this will be contentious, but and they will have to front the community when this comes out of a business casing exercise to concept. But I can't get past the fact that, notwithstanding the park, the more fundamental issue here is the lack of solution, which is leading to that devastating flood effects within that catchment, which must be the subject of the response now. So that is really where I sit on this matter. And I say that because I've had some of these healthy waters interventions which are quite necessary in places where, frankly, they shouldn't be building houses in my ward, but they are. And I can absolutely understand the frustration, the irony of houses being removed in Nile Road and over the back fence, new houses being built. Accept that. But there does need to be a solution in this particular catchment. But I think that I have to be persuaded by what Brian said to me. And I really encourage that if Event Finder Stadium's leadership team is going to be brought into this discussion, I really would like to vote in accordance with what I've just been told, which is that they are more comfortable with the Healthy Waters proposal as it stands. I do want to thank Takapuna Golf for their proposal. I think it is worth a consideration if there is a way to mitigate this. But fundamentally, there needs to be a way to look at how one can take the stormwater away from the homes to the sink in that catchment, which would be the correct outcome, and I think that takes priority. And finally, Chair, I don't want to support anything that would delay the potential use of funding from Crown for a good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Thanks for this. I commend the Healthy Waters from their approach, and I'm quite happy that the golf club came up with something to help preserve their operating thing plus do the stuff. I've got great confidence in the Healthy Waters guys that will look at both. I wouldn't be at all surprised to find that the golf course one's a fair bit more expensive, but I looked at the number somewhere or other, I think it was 163 million for 265 houses, something like that. We got about 600,000 a house. So it's more other things that you've got to value into this work. And there will be some intrinsic value of having a golf course or not having a golf course. I think they'll come back with two good proposals and there'll be different prices and we'll have to make a decision. We may even go for the golf course one if it's a bit more, if it has some value that we can see. But we do need to get on. So I'm supporting whichever one of those ones get through, whether it's got the amendment or not. But I think we've got to get on with this. Okay?
Okay, thank you. There's no more comments. My thoughts. I won't be supporting the amendment that's put up. It's for me. I spent time working with staff and asking them what would be the right way of dealing with the Takapuna Golf Course, and it was on their advice that initial recommendation was put up. And and I also spoke to Richard as a seconder, and being the local councillor. I cannot see the point. We have heard a very, very clear message this morning that we need to get on with this. And, there are scars in that community and we will only start to heal those slightly. We'll never heal them totally, but by actually doing something. And we've heard from staff that any unsolicited, unproven things could well delay things, and I'm not prepared to do that. We have got a proposal. When you go to page 259 to 263 of the attachments, there is option after option that was considered by WSP. Option 259 to 263, line after line of options. So there's been any number, I didn't count them, I'm failed school C maths, any number of options there. They have been considered. We aren't going to hang around. We cannot hang around for the people of that area, and so I'm going to be voting against it. So there's no other comments. We will put this.
Mr. Chair, I'll withdraw it.
Withdrawing it. You.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So the motion has been, or the amendment has been withdrawn. So we go back now to the...
Point of order. I just want to get this clear. Do the standing orders allow that? It feels like I have been, as an elected member, I've had to endure a debate for 45 minutes and then the member sees no merit in the motion that he moved. That created an hour, 45 minutes, an hour of debate.
Righty-ho, so standing orders are that you can't withdraw it without the consent of everybody.
Therefore, Chair, I think I will not consent to this being withdrawn. This has used up incredible time and wasted our resources. And now it's being seen as having no merit by the mover. Incredible.
Okay, so we'll put it, Wayne, and...
Can we have a debate on whether we can have a debate?
No. No, we will not. So we'll put the motion. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? No.
No.
It's been defeated. So we'll go back to the original resolutions, which included the which is the original thing. Is there any discussion on that? None?
Get on with it.
Fair call. Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye!
And against? Carried. Right, thank you. We just have one more item, which is, before we go into, which is the summary of transport and resilience. Wayne? Thank you, Wayne. Second to Lotu. Any discussion? Those in favour say aye. And against? Carried. Right, someone like to move that we move into confidential? Thank you, Wayne. Second. Thank you, Lotu. Any discussion? Those in favour say aye. And against? Carried. Righty-ho, we'll just have to take a small adjournment while we put in the cone of silence, which only people born before 1990 will understand. So we'll just adjourn while we clear the room.